Well, the Game Awards 2025 are in the bag, and I think that was the best show Jeff's ever put on. I thought that one was pretty good. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 swept the awards, winning just about everything. Donkey Kong Bonanza took the first award of the night, Family Game Award, which I feel is just like Nintendo and get Doug Bowser up there award. But more importantly, how did Switch 2 do in terms of new game announcements? Today we're going to look at every trailer from the Game Awards that has the Switch 2 logo there of new announcements, right? They did show Lego Batman again. They showed new footage of Leon and Resident Evil Requiem. There were games that were reappearing and did, of course, include that Nintendo Switch 2 logo. But these are the new announcements. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about the amount of games and how you feel about which is your favorite, which is your least favorite. What game that didn't get a Switch 2 logo are you hoping to see have one? Now, I just want to say, Nintendo themselves were not here in any capacity except Bowser accepting the award for Donkey Kong Bonanza and Best Family Game, and then they showed a brief clip from Super Mario Galaxy, the movie coming out next year. They didn't have any Nintendo announcements, they didn't have any Nintendo teases, they didn't have anything like that. There was a commercial for upcoming Switch 2 games that showed the Duskbloods, Resident Evil, and Final Fantasy VII Remake, but that was it from Nintendo themselves. Now, a bunch of really awesome games were announced at this show. Which ones got Switch 2 logos? One got the logo right from the jump, and that's this right here. Pragmata from Capcom is coming to Switch 2, and this was a really nice surprise because this game is out in April, and previously nothing has been said about a Switch 2 version, but they popped the Switch 2 logo at the end of this trailer, and the game is coming out day and date on our hybrid system. And it goes to show how much Capcom is really supporting the platform. They've had an unbelievable amount of titles and support, and I think Capcom, Ubisoft, and Square Enix right now are like the biggest friends of the Switch 2. And it's something interesting that we can discuss after this and after we see the trailers, maybe in a different video, about how like there are certain publishers that are really jamming the Switch 2 support, and then there's others that are just completely not about it. And there is a pretty big divide between Eastern developers and Western developers. But Pragmata is an interesting game. It's been teased for years, and it has a very like old school feel, which I appreciate. I think one of my favorite parts about the Game Awards 2025 is it felt like sort of the games as service multiplayer slop was not everywhere, and instead we got a lot of single player games, we got a lot of games with unique visions, we got a lot of games that had unique ideas. Pragmata is a shooter, but you complete a puzzle every time you shoot somebody because you've got this little girl robot who's trying to help you out and also high-fiving, and then boom, there comes that Switch 2 logo, which is pretty cool. Day and date, April 24th, 2026. It's not the last you'll see of Capcom. Another game that got confirmed for Switch 2 actually wasn't even a part of the show, but it's one of the biggest announcements, and that's South of Midnight from Microsoft and Xbox coming to Nintendo Switch 2. Now, this is an Xbox exclusive, and again, a game that some might say feels antiquated. It kind of feels like a 360 game, but made in 2025. I think this game is super sick. Okay, I think the game definitely feels like nostalgic in that 360 way. It's scoped for more of a 360 style linear narrative based game, but Compulsion did awesome with this. Okay, I think Compulsion is a great developer who has brilliant ideas. We Happy Few, to me, didn't ever do it. Like, they tried, but there was no game there. There's game here. I think the combat is excellent. It's arena-based combat, which is pretty fun and pretty cool and challenging, especially if you bump it up to a harder difficulty. But it's the story and the emotion and the charm of this place and this girl and her trying to save her mom that they really evoke throughout the gameplay and the graphics themselves. There's a really interesting, it's very like fantastical, magical realism type story here that I think is worth being experienced, and it's going to be great on Switch 2. It's not doing anything crazy, so it should run extra good. It is a linear story-based game, like I mentioned. No crazy open world, although the Switch 2 can do that stuff. So I was surprised when games like Tomb Raider Catalyst didn't get any Switch 2 mention. I was surprised when games like Control Resonant didn't get any Switch 2 mention. Look, we know this system can handle it. They do Resident Evil 9 Requiem just fine. They're doing Elden Ring eventually just fine. Final Fantasy VII, they say the whole trilogy is going to be on the platform, so they can do it. It seems like it might boil down to which publishers and which studios were given early access to the dev kits and which were not. In which case, I don't know if this is something that we can blame the developers and publishers for, or if we blame Nintendo for. Because given how well this system is sold, and given how the Switch took the world by storm, I think we should have seen much more widespread support of the Switch 2 at tonight's show. And instead it ended up that many of the big reveals were missing out on Switch 2 ports. Now, some of them were multiplayer games, some of them were shooters, and maybe you say, hey, they're trying to push their game to the limits on PS5 and Xbox Series X and PC, and that's where they want to be. But these games are also going to be on Xbox Series S based on the logos at the end of their trailers. And if they're on Xbox Series S, then they can be on Switch too. It's really not that much of a leap. And even if they think that the current player base isn't primed for a first-person shooter or whatever game they were advertising, like, it's fine. You can make those games all work on Switch 2. The audience is just a normal gaming audience. It's not like everybody needs it to be a bright, cheery platformer, although I gotta call out my bud, David Soliday. Cherry platformer. Although I do have to call out Davide, the coolest cat ever, who made the Mario plus Rabbids game and absolutely loved Nintendo and loved working with the Mario franchise and Miyamoto over there at Ubisoft. He started his own studio, and he's got this Bradley the Badger game that has this badger kind of being goofy and like a character mascot, but invading other game worlds, not like licensed, but it's like clear he's going to The Last of Us, he's going to Cyberpunk, he's going to Bloodborne. It looks awesome. We should check that out, and hopefully it does get a Switch 2 port. It's currently only PC. Alas, we'll continue. After South of Midnight, we do have a very exciting announcement, and I'm glad this one is getting there. Again, it's Capcom coming through in the clutch. It makes sense, though, because this is a 2D game, and, you know, a lot of the titles that were shown for Switch 2 specifically were of the smaller variety, and it makes me wonder what's going on here, because we know this system is capable, and that's where I go back to, like, maybe it is just the fact that they didn't get dev kits to these publishers, they didn't give dev kits to these developers. They didn't know yet that the system was going to sell so well, so they didn't want to prep all their development and get it ready. I was surprised we didn't get an Expedition 33 Game of the Year port on Switch 2. Maybe that's still to come in early 2026 or something of the sort. But this right here is the Blue Bomber back in action. This is actually Capcom getting their feet wet with a new 2D, gorgeous-looking Mega Man game. It's a 2027 title, so it's a ways out there, but getting this on Switch 2 is going to be fantastic. I think the art direction and the animation are looking absolutely prime. They only show a very little bit here. I think you can make a Mega Man game pretty easily. Like, this should be like a masterpiece, right? Like, doing this wrong is a huge misstep. And, you know, the graphics look nice, the visuals look nice. I want the controls to be great. And whatever the dual override system is indicating, whatever that mechanism or mechanic is, it better be good. It better not be too gimmicky. It better be fun. And I'm glad, of course, that Capcom is such a huge supporter. Now, outside of Capcom and outside of Microsoft, nobody really big wanted to do much with Switch 2. But we did get some very cool games. And one you're going to see right here is actually a Switch 2 exclusive. Hallelujah. About time. This is Orbitals, not from Nintendo, but it is taking the vein of It Takes Two and Split Fiction. We saw quite a few games tonight that are of that two-player co-op, doing different things vibe, and hopefully they have, you know, Friends Pass, same type ideas. This one is an anime-style space game. It's got a really great look, and it does seem like it has fun gameplay. Not promising that this is going to be a Game of the Year contender like It Takes Two, but I am hopeful that given it is a Switch 2 exclusive, they are going to make it work very well with the system, and they are going to make it really fun, something that you can play portably, something that you can play locally with your friend, as we see here from the split screen action, and of course different dual actions, right, for each character, a la It Takes Two. Orbitals looks pretty sweet, and then if you're not a fan of the anime aesthetic, maybe you're a fan of the stop motion aesthetic, and that's where Out of Words debuts. This is a stop motion game for a lot of platforms, including Switch 2. It's from Epic Games, and it is once again a co-op adventure. This one seems to be more, you're both doing the same thing, less of the It Takes Two vibe, but still cute co-op vibe with two characters working together. They're Carla and Kurt, but he doesn't know their names because they're out of words, hence the title of the game. I love seeing things like this, but I did expect more from the Switch 2. And if you want my answer, my true opinion, like, is it Nintendo's fault? Is it developers' fault? I think it just might be the timing of this show, right? Getting this show locked in was months ago. Getting these trailers ready was put into place a long time ago. The Switch 2 only came out in June. The Switch 2 was only, well, it was instantly successful after the first week, but maybe some were concerned. Nintendo, we know, did not send out a plethora of dev kits, so maybe some of these publishers and developers did not get the ability to prep their games for the Switch 2. I hope that next year's Game Awards, we just see Switch 2, and I guess the biggest hope that I have, we also have Phasmophobia coming to Switch 2, a past indie title that did win awards and is fun for a lot of players. Not really my cup of tea, but this will be a nice get for the Switch 2. It's a 2020 game, so again, nothing to write home about. And I don't want to take away from the games that were announced for Switch 2, but I'm hoping that things like Tomb Raider Catalyst, or at least the Tomb Raider 1 remake, like those do get confirmed for Switch at a later date. And they could, right? We've seen that happen. Look, we go right to the back, Pragmata. That is something that had no Switch 2 until the end. And maybe these games, like I said, were being developed before they had Switch 2 dev kits, and maybe as the marketing cycle continues, Tomb Raider Catalyst isn't until 2027, maybe that will show up and pop a Switch 2 logo at that point in time as we approach launch. Still a lot of games though to look forward to. 007 First Light got Lenny Kravitz as its villain. That is confirmed for Switch 2. Like I said, Lego Batman, it's out in May. That is confirmed for Switch 2. Resident Evil 9 looks great with Leon providing more of the action, and I believe it's Claire Ashcraft providing more of the stealth. Super pumped for Resident Evil. That's in February and going to be great. I just wanted to see a little bit more of a forward-thinking vibe from some of these companies, and right now it seems to be a bit of a divide with Microsoft and Ubisoft holding down the Western world for Nintendo, and then the rest of the support coming from Square Enix and Capcom and some of their Eastern partners. You know, that's fine, but at the end of the day, I'd love to see more and more of these games make it over to Switch 2, and we know the system has the power. That's not the problem. We know the system is capable of it. It can get games day and date like Resident Evil and Pragmata. If you put the effort in, if you put the TLC in, if you give the team the tools and the assets, they can make it work on Switch 2. Maybe Nintendo just hasn't provided enough of that. So all in all, I thought the Game Awards was a great show. A lot of super cool looking games. Not all of them, obviously, coming to Switch 2, but some of my highlights were, of course, Saros for PlayStation 5. That one will not come to Switch 2 because it is a PS5 exclusive, but I thought the new shooter Highguard looked really cool from the team of Apex Legends and Titanfall. The new game from Wildflower Games, which are previously Uncharted developers, about like a grandma witch and her weird like troll forest beast. It kind of gave Last Guardian vibes. Really cool looking game. Loved that a lot. Hope that gets a Switch 2 version. And I do think a lot of these titles that are currently Steam only will get a Switch 2 version as, like I said, we approach launch and we get close to the marketing cycle. And hey, we know Nintendo also likes to just take credit and do some things themselves. There's some of these games that won't get a Switch 2 version until they pop in a direct. And that's kind of the unfortunate tipping of the scales that Nintendo decides to partake in. It's a balancing act, right? Where the games don't get announced for Switch 2, and then they want them for the Direct because they have their own shows and they don't really partake too much in this, but then you don't think the game is coming to Switch 2 until much later, and it's sort of a weird world, and then you've already seen the game, so the initial hype is over, and you wish they would have just put the Switch 2 logo at the start, but Nintendo likes to own the moment and have the Switch 2 logo for them. I'm glad we are getting some stuff, and I'm glad it wasn't a blank, because the past few years have been absolutely empty for Nintendo. This one, at least, there was a large part of the games, and even some of the bigger titles like 007 that got a huge moment, and Resident Evil Requiem that got a huge moment with Switch 2 logos. So love to see that. Just hope that Tomb Raider and some of the other titles, some of the shooters in particular, do make their way over. We deserve those as well, and I know they can run on the platform. But a lot of cool games tonight. Which was your absolute favorite? I was sad to see no Judas, no Clockwork Revolution, no BioShock 4, no Half-Life 3, but Control 2 Resonant looks awesome, and I'll play and eat anything that Remedy ever puts on my plate. I'm hoping that gets a Switch 2 version. Control 1 did have that cloud version. Put it on Switch 2. I'd love to see it eventually. In the meantime, everybody, let me know your favorites. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more from me, and of course, the Switch 2. And until that time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.